Minister Heappey, thank you very much for joining us in our program. And from the perspective of United Kingdom, for the beginning, what do you expect will happen in Ukraine in next weeks and months?
Well, firstly, I think it's important to note that what has already happened in Ukraine is, I think, beyond what anybody in the West really thought possible. The Ukrainians have resisted incredibly, to the point that the hubris in the original Russian plan has been brutally exposed. The idea that they could advance concurrently on 7 axes, and that, you know, the outrageous expectation that the Ukrainians were just going to welcome them into their country, and that this was all going to be over in days. You know, that has been exposed as the most extraordinary arrogance on the part of the Kremlin. Putin was clearly appallingly advised by his Ministry of Defense. And thousands of brave young Russian men have died as a consequence of that extraordinary failure of Russian strategic planning. And if I were Russian parents right now, fearing that my son or daughter was about to be conscripted into a Russian army that is being forced to double down on Putin's failures so far, I would be outraged. I would be challenging whether or not that sort of conscription is necessary. Putin is not representing the interests of Russia. He is now representing the interests of himself, and he is refusing to accept the outrageous failure of the original Russian plan.
How do you explain then that nothing is happening on political level inside Russia right now?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that I think is for the Russian people to challenge. Putin, of course, has a vice-like grip on Russian media. He has a kleptocracy that surrounds him, that is united in their kind of collective self-interest. And so to challenge within that kleptocracy is to effectively push yourself out from the hand that feeds you. But you know, as our own Prime Minister said in Russian, to the Russian people the other day, you know, they should seek the truth, and all they have to do is get a VPN onto their device so that they can access a world. Don't take it from me. I'm a politician from a country that you are told day in, day out is your adversary. We're not. The UK actually is a great friend of the Russian people. Our argument is with Putin, but the truth is out there. There's a world of information out there. You yourself, night after night, will report on the horrors of what's happening in Ukraine. You know that Ukraine was a peaceful nation living within its own borders, and then Putin, out of arrogance and belligerence, rolled across the border to invade a sovereign country. The Russian people, if they just get a VPN onto their phone and look for that information, will be appalled at what is being done in their name. And then, you know, to your question, which I've managed to avoid for about 3 minutes, but it's an important preamble, because what the Russians are going to do next is to recock and come again. And if I were the Russian people, I'd be looking and going, well, why? You've already lost thousands of your brave young men. Hundreds of millions of pounds worth, of dollars worth of equipment has already been lost. Why? Why? Just stop.
Oh, you said you're a politician, but you're also ex-soldier. So from military perspective, after withdrawal from the areas north from Kiev, what do you expect in eastern Ukraine right now? A lot of military analysis in Croatia expect terrible fights and terrible months in front of us there.
So I think I do too. I think that the hubris in trying to do 7 things at once has clearly failed. And the withdrawal from the north of Kiev is clearly a good thing for Ukraine. Brutal in that it exposes, of course, the horrors of what has been happening in the towns that have been occupied by Russians over the last 4 or 5 weeks. But I think that there will be a period of refurbishment as those battalion tactical groups that have come out from the north of Kiev rearm and replenish as they move round towards the east. I think that there will be fierce fighting this summer in the Donbass. I think the Ukrainians are ready for that. I think that the I think that the international effort to resupply Ukraine has given Ukraine a strategic depth that Russia doesn't have. You know, a lot of Russia's top-line kit has been destroyed in the initial phases of the conflict. Their missile stockpiles are depleted. So I think that what we're about to see in the Donbass will be horrendous. I think it'll be fierce. I think the fighting will be of a scale that we haven't seen on this continent for a very long time. But I also think it is now a situation, because of the arrogance of the original plan, where actually a depleted Russian army is against a Ukrainian army that has real conviction in its cause and morale is high, and the support of the West in giving it the weapons it needs to defend its territory. And so I think that we will find a conflict in which Ukraine will meet Russia as an equal. And I think there is an opportunity for Ukraine to bring this to an end on Ukrainian terms, not Russian ones.
Next phase of the war, next level of difficulties for Ukraine, that's what analysts are saying. And they ask question, is Europe, is world ready for a high level of military support for Ukraine with heavy weapons, heavy artillery, even tanks and stuff like that, modern weaponry, not just something what was left after collapse of Warsaw Pact?
Well, I mean, look, there's lots in that question, but to your last point first, I don't think anybody should think of this as, you know, the reason that people like me are desperately trying to find all over the world weapon systems from the Warsaw Pact era is because those are the ones that the Ukrainians currently operate. And so by far the easiest thing to do is, as they run out of ammunition of their own, to provide them with more ammunition that work in the weapon systems that they've already got. And so that is important. And if we were to, you know, of course everybody could talk about providing them with, you know, UK Challenger tanks, or, you know, American Abrams tanks, or you know, US fighter jets, whatever else, but all of those things would require the Ukrainians that are right now fighting for the existence of their country to step back, train up on these new platforms, and then get back in the fight. And the Ukrainians, every day is an existential challenge for Ukraine. And so there simply isn't the time, really, to retrain people on NATO pieces of kit and get them back into the fight. So that's why everybody's focused on Warsaw Pact era stuff. Already we've seen enormous growth in what Western countries are willing to provide. The UK has always, I think, been at the front end of the pack, and, you know, we've pushed the envelope quite a lot ourselves. There's things that we are now sending that 6 weeks ago we were convinced would be unthinkable to send. But each and every country will make their own judgments. Some countries are geographically closer to the conflict and therefore more fearful of what it might mean for their own borders. Some countries have a higher level of energy or economic dependency on Russia and are more fearful for the consequences of that. Some countries have a higher level of Russian infiltration and malign activity within their public discourse and within their media and within their political systems, and so they're more fearful of that. So I think it imprudent for a politician like me to travel around the world being critical of those who haven't gone as far as we have. But the fact is that there is an amazing, huge international community of nations that are giving everything from, you know, precision deep strike weapons all the way through to medical supplies. Now, all of that is needed, so it's all good.
You said international community, but yeah. How then would you define the position of Hungary and Viktor Orban, especially after elections? Yesterday he said that he's ready to pay gas in ruble. He said that he's not willing transportation of military help over Hungarian territory. He's leading Hungary a little bit different than the rest of Europe, not just European Union, but Europe in general.
Well, each and all to their own. And as I've said, I think that it is imprudent when the thing that Putin wants more than anything else, if he can't have the territorial gains he thought he could have in Ukraine, then fracturing the Western alliance is a next best prize. Every country
Could
has...
this happen?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think so. And I think that that's why answers to your question are so important, because different countries perceive the geopolitical situation differently. Different countries see the risk to themselves differently. Different countries see different routes out of this. We can all disagree privately about what may or may not be the right thing to do, but fundamentally, Hungary is an important part of the Western alliance, and Hungary remains an important ally and partner, therefore, as a consequence.
Back to Ukraine, after the massacre in Bucha, do you think that something indefinitely changed, considering the Russian position in the world? Today, United Nations will be discussing option of kicking Russia out of Human Rights Council.
Well, look, I mean, the Russian ambassador to the United Nations is a joke, isn't he? I mean, I don't know how he keeps a straight face, and I certainly don't know how he sleeps at night when he sits in the Security Council and talks all this nonsense that somehow that the atrocities that we've seen on the streets of Irpin, Bucha, Hostomel are somehow the Ukrainians doing it to themselves. It's just an outrage, an absolute outrage. Now, whether this is a moment of challenge to the United Nations itself, I think we've got to be careful, because, you know, that is, again, you know, if Putin can't have the territorial gains he wants, the breakdown in the cohesion of the Western alliance and the rules-based international system that he has so serially sought to challenge, and we think it's our responsibility to defend, we're kind of doing his job for him. Now, the UN clearly has been put into very sharp focus because of the way that it works and the vetoes, and, you know, that is not a new problem. I just think that, you know, what we have to, you know, almost, the more ridiculous that their ambassador sounds in New York, the more that he says things that with our own eyes we are seeing on our TV screens and know to be untrue, the more that Russia isolates itself in the world, the more that countries who, you know, for their own reasons had earlier in the conflict sought maybe to kind of remain out of it, or had sought to kind of balance their comments, they start to see pictures of civilians murdered, assassinated in the street for no reason. They hear stories of teenage girls being raped by Russian soldiers, and those countries become emboldened. You know, Putin, every day that ambassador sits in the Security Council and spouts his nonsense, every day that Russia pretends that these outrages being done by Russian troops in Putin's name are not happening, the more isolated Russia becomes on the international stage, even amongst the countries who have sought previously to give them some sort of balance.
Another humanitarian issue discussed openly and loudly even in the United Kingdom. Your government was criticized because of your approach to Ukrainian refugees. United Kingdom asked them for visas. Procedure was very difficult, at least for one period of time, for the people who lost everything. Did you change anything?
Well, so not being in the Schengen area means that things are immediately different for us than they are for the rest of Europe. And I think that it's not unreasonable, given that we're not in Schengen, to want to do some checks. But I mean, we have changed an enormous amount. What we've been able to do is firstly be able to move the visa application process to be an online one. We've massively increased the capacity to process visa applications, and we've said that all of the checks that need to be done can be done from within the UK once people have arrived. And hundreds of thousands of UK families have made space available in their homes to host Ukrainian refugees when they arrive. So we got off to a slow start, but we are quickly accelerating. 25,000 visas have been given already. Thousands more are being given every day. But what I think is really striking, to compare this to what we were doing 5 months ago or 6 months ago, when we were bringing Afghans out of Kabul, that was a group of people who had served with the United Kingdom during our time in Afghanistan and were frankly leaving their country forever. They were despairing of the the return of the Taliban, and they wanted to come to the UK to start a new life altogether. Ukrainians are a proud, patriotic people, and if Putin thinks that this flow of refugees is to push Ukrainians out of Ukraine and only leave a Russian-speaking rump thereafter, he is fundamentally wrong. The people that are leaving Ukraine right now are women, children, the vulnerable, who are leaving the conflict. But they don't want to spend the rest of their life in the spare room of a British family. They don't want to resettle in Germany or France or Croatia. As generous as the Croatian offer has been, and you have been impressive in the way that you have brought refugees here, they want to return to Ukraine. They're proud Ukrainians.
We saw that also here, but next question, energetic crisis. Are you afraid in the United Kingdom? Do you think that Europe will be ready to introduce energy embargo on the Russia, or are you afraid that Russia will start to use gas and oil as a weapon?
Well, I think arguably Russia's been using gas and oil as a weapon for the last 20 years.
Actively, put it this way.
Yes. But I think that I don't think we're scared of it. I think we recognise that sometimes freedom comes with cost. And, you know, there are lots of countries around Europe around this corner of Europe certainly, who need no lectures from us about the price that sometimes has to be paid for freedom. And, you know, there will be some capitals within Europe who are more nervous about this step than others. The cost, and be clear, the cost falls unequally around Europe as a consequence. But if we want to get to a place where Putin is an irrelevance in the world, where Putin's hubris has cost him any esteem that Russia had on the international stage, the key lever that needs to be pulled is removing our dependency on his oil and gas. And that, you know, there are options to diversify supply. There are options to do more through and around the Caspian. There are options to bring in more from other oil and gas producing countries around the world. And of course, there are opportunities to use this as a catalyst for transition away from oil and gas and into renewables and other sources of energy that Putin can't control.
Last question, you just met representatives of Croatian Defense Ministry. What can you tell us about that?
Well, look, I mean, I think you know, when the chips are down, you learn who your friends are. And what the UK and Ukraine has learned is that when the chips are down, Croatia is a country that steps forward and does what is right. And so in your Ministry of Defence just now, I met with State Secretary Jakub and his team, and we compared notes on how we think it's going in Ukraine, what we think the Ukrainians need next. The UK and Croatia is completely aligned in its view that Ukraine has an opportunity to bring this to an end on Ukrainian terms, and Croatia has already admirably shown that it is willing to support Ukraine in making that happen. The UK is a big supporter of Croatia's as a consequence, and together we'll continue to supporting Ukraine.
Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.